Author and historian Ben Wynne is a native of Florence, Mississippi. He earned his doctorate degree in history at the University of Mississippi and currently serves as professor of history at the University of North Georgia in Gainesville. Ben is the author of numerous works on Southern history and culture, including this book here, Something in the Water, The History of Music in Macon, Georgia. And his latest book is called A Hound Dog Tale, Big Mama and Elvis and the Song That Changed Everything. Welcome, Ben Wynne.
Thank you, Tim.
How are you, man?
I'm doing fine. I appreciate you having me.
And you just attended your first comp lunch.
I did. It was outstanding.
It was a good one. We had a pretty good crowd there, and you met some people who
We're in the book.
are in this book. Yeah, Paul Hornsby was there at the lunch,
Sure.
and some guy named Newton was there. Newton Collier.
Oh, yeah. I believe I've heard of him.
Yeah. So, and we'll get on this, but tell us your background.
Well, let's see. I'm a native Mississippian, and I got my undergraduate degree at a little school called Millsaps College in Jackson, Mississippi.
Okay.
And then I got a doctorate from the University of Mississippi in history. And I taught for a couple of years at Ole Miss.
Okay.
Then I did
You're covering the whole state.
I had a traveling year that I taught at Florida State.
Wow.
And I taught a little bit at Valdosta, and then I landed the job at the University of North Georgia. I've been there about 20 years.
Yeah. Were you like a history geek when you were a kid, or?
Somewhat, yeah.
Okay.
I never knew I was going to be making a living
Yeah.
at it, but that's how it turned out.
Yeah. So, and a few of your books are music oriented. Your first music book was In Tune, right?
Right.
Tell us about In Tune.
Well, In Tune was a kind of a dual biography of a guy named Jimmy Rogers, who was, some people call him the father of country music, and Charlie Patton, who some people call the father of Delta blues.
Yeah.
And they weren't in-depth biographies per se, but they were biographical in nature to show the interaction between the country music and the blues music. Both those guys were born in Mississippi.
Yeah.
They came from poor circumstances, and anybody that knows anything about the blues and country music knows that it's all kinds of things are mixed up
Absolutely.
together. And through the life stories of those two guys, I was trying to show a little bit of that.
And Charlie Patton supposedly influenced Robert Johnson.
Right, supposedly influenced Robert Johnson, supposedly influenced, Howlin' Wolf said he did influence him,
Yeah.
and many others. So anytime you hear a blues song that comes out of that Delta blues tradition, Charlie Patton's, he's in there somewhere.
Yeah. I'm assuming that it's hard to research somebody from back in that era because there may not be a lot of written materials.
It is a challenge sometimes, depending who it is. For instance, the Jimmy Rogers and Charlie Patton, well, there was quite a bit of stuff on Jimmy Rogers because he recorded with RCA Victor, a national company, and he was well known in his lifetime, whereas Patton was more obscure. But there were people who went out in the field during the 60s and early 70s and interviewed people who remembered Charlie Patton and could fill in a few gaps. So there's enough in there to do what I wanted to do. But it's with the old blues guys, especially, it's hit and miss.
Yeah, and some of the hillbilly guys.
And some of the country guys, too, that's right.
Yeah. So who recorded Charlie Patton?
Charlie Patton recorded at mostly at Paramount Studios in Wisconsin. Grafton,
Oh, he actually went to the
Grafton,
studios.
Wisconsin. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And what they would do, the Paramount was an independent label specialized in race records,
Yeah.
and did some other things, too. But they would hire local people who you could call them talent scouts, and they would go out and look for these blues artists in places like the Mississippi Delta.
Yeah.
Then you bring them up to Wisconsin, you press a record, you give them $50, and then you see if the record will sell within the African American community.
Right.
And if it sold okay, then they call you back and give you another $50. And
Yeah.
you do a little bit, do some more recording.
Tell us about your new book, A Hound Dog Tale.
A Hound Dog's Tale, well, as the title suggests, it's about the song Hound Dog, which was recorded first by a woman named Willie Mae Thornton. People call her Big Mama Thornton. And then there's lots of cover versions of it, but the Big Mama Thornton version and the Elvis Presley version are the two versions that people know.
Yeah.
And what I did, I discovered just sort of by chance that the song had this great backstory to it that included all this other cast of characters. Because if the song was written by two white Jewish teenagers, specifically for Big Mama Thornton, an African American woman from Alabama, and the white Jewish teenagers were from New York and Baltimore, respectively.
Yeah, and we're talking about
Lieber and Stoller.
Lieber and Stoller.
And so they wrote that for her. She recorded it, became an R&B hit. And then
Was this one of their first productions?
it was it was one of their first, maybe in the first 8 or 10.
Yeah, and one of them's passed away recently, but the other's still alive. Is that
Mike Stoller is still alive, and Jerry Lieber, I think he died several years ago.
Okay.
But Mike Stoller is still, I think he's 90, in his early 90s, I believe.
You know if anybody's passed the book on to him, or?
I do not know.
Okay,
I do not know.
okay.
But anyway, it after she recorded it, became a hit, and then a bunch of people copied it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't R&B people at first, because they were intimidated by Big Mama Thornton's version, because it had been a hit on the R&B chart. So a bunch of country guys recorded it. Then those predictably those versions went nowhere, and
Well, and her version was kind of growly and
gritty and growly, and it was a woman chastising sort of a layabout husband or boyfriend, and so calling him a hound dog. And then, but Sam Phillips recorded a knockoff, not a cover, but it was an answer song to Hound Dog that sounded just like Hound Dog with a few of the words rearranged, and that led to a big. Before he met Elvis, he did this, and that led to a lawsuit. I mean, it had a whole backstory before the song even got to Elvis Presley. Only about the last third of the book are about Elvis. The first 2/3 is this dramatic backstory of the song. And Johnny Otis, the R&B producer from the West Coast, he was involved in this story. Big Mama Thornton's manager was a guy named Don Roby. They called him Diamond Don Roby. He was a kind of a quasi-gangster figure in Houston, Texas. So he's got a whole backstory. So it's a big cast of characters.
Well, and Lieber and Stoller, they wrote tons of stuff that was huge, especially back in the day. And you spoke of the answer song. That used to be kind of a big deal, that if somebody wrote a song that was a hit and then somebody else would.
Sam Phillips' answer song that got him in trouble was called Bearcat. And the first line is, "You ain't nothing but a bearcat."
Okay.
And he got a guy named Rufus Thomas, who's a well-known Memphis personality. He sang it. And Rufus didn't get in trouble, but Sam tried to claim a writing credit, and that led to some problems for him.
Yeah.
But it's only the last third of the book is the Elvis part. There's all kinds of stuff that happens leading up to that, and then the Elvis part includes a lot of the Milton Berle show and the Ed Sullivan show and all the things that many people know about Elvis.
All right. Well, of all, Elvis, of course, is huge, but of all the Mississippi artists, who do you tend to listen to the most?
Of the Mississippi folks, I'd say you got your B.B. King and you got your Elvis, and you can go from there wherever you want to go.
And B.B.'s from Indianola,
right?
Elvis is from Tupelo.
It's a great museum in Indianola, the B.B. King Museum.
Oh, really?
He's buried there on the museum grounds.
You're writing a book about like a 2.5-minute song.
How did that happen?
How did that happen? Yeah.
Well, I've wondered about that many times, but again, it's the backstory. You tell Lieber and Stoller's story leading up to that. You talk about there was great drama surrounding Big Mama Thornton getting the song. At one point, there's one story. Lieber and Stoller, again, two white teenagers. They come to Big Mama Thornton. They had this song that they were commissioned to write by Johnny Otis. He's the one that put them together. And they give it to Big Mama Thornton the first time she sees it, and she starts singing it. And she sings it at a slower pace than the way you know it. And kind of like a crooner almost. And Jerry Lieber, the white 19-year-old, tells her, "Hey, you're not doing it right." And she's a veteran blues performer. And so that almost got Jerry Lieber killed. So, that story, that's a good 5 pages right there, just that story. So, and then, the background of Big Mama Thornton, the background for manager who played a big role in all of this. And then the Sam Phillips lawsuit that was filed by Big Mama Thornton's manager is a fairly significant lawsuit, or it was at the time, regarding copyright laws and things like that. And, or got a lot of publicity anyway. And, just again, there's stories everywhere you look. But yeah, on the surface, and also, I forgot to mention, the Elvis Presley version is nothing like, well, it's very different from the Big Mama Thornton version. And the reason that's the case is because Elvis Presley's version was not a cover of Big Mama Thornton's version. Elvis Presley's version was the cover of a version that was done by a band called Freddie Bell and the Bellboys, I believe was their name, from Las Vegas. They were a Las Vegas lounge act. They did that song Hound Dog, but they couldn't use those bluesy words in Vegas in a gritty song. They did it as kind of a novelty song, and they jumped around and they'd bark and howl at the moon. And it was kind of a joke. And Presley, when he was in Las Vegas, heard their version, and it's their version that he did. A lot of people think, well, Elvis just covered that Big Mama Thornton version, which wasn't the case. So there's an entire backstory about that too. So it's more than it meets the eye on that song. But yeah, I did. When I finished that book, I couldn't believe I got 250 pages out of a 2.5 minute song.
Well, tell us about the book writing experience. What all goes into that? Did someone, do publishers approach you with something they want to write about, or do you come up with the idea, or how does that happen?
It can happen both ways. With the In Tune book, that book, I came up with that idea, and then I shopped it around, and Louisiana State University Press accepted it, and it worked out well. Yeah. And then with the book about Macon, the Mercer folks had seen that In Tune book, and kind of very informally asked me something about doing a book on Macon music history. So they came to me, and I'd done long time ago, I did a couple of Civil War era books with Mercer. Yeah. And so they knew me a little bit. And, most of the time I come up with the idea, and then I try to sell it. And then once you've produced a book with a publisher like Mercer, a great publisher, so is LSU, a great publisher, then if you have a good idea, you have a relationship with them, and it helps with all of that. But
you're a full-time professor, and so you can't just sit down 4 to 8 hours a day and write.
Right. It's kind of, you got to do a lot of stuff during the summer, if you're not teaching in the summer. And, a lot of Sunday, do it on Sunday, and a lot of do it, from 8 p.m. to midnight. You got a lot of stuff like that because when school's in session, when the university's in session, it takes up much of my time dealing with the classes and the students and so on and so forth.
Is it an enjoyable process, or is it?
It is an enjoyable process for me. Yeah.
Okay.
But it is. But I'll tell you, it's enjoyable, but it's work. It's also work.
Yeah.
So it's a thing where, if you like your job, then it's a fun process. But if you don't like your job, it wouldn't be a fun process. But I like doing this. But it is work because, once you put everything in a book and they publish that book, then that book never goes away. So you got to kind of be careful with, you got to make sure you approach everything correctly.
And I know you put a lot of work and research into this book here.
Pretty good bit, yeah.
Because it is very thorough, and it goes all the way back to 1823. If I look at that, I don't have my readers on.
That's it. You're doing one.
The name of the book is Something in the Water, and it's the history of Macon music up until 1980.
Right.
Did you have any idea about Macon and the music history then?
I had some idea, but not that much. I knew that Little Richard was from Macon. I knew that Otis Redding was from Macon. I knew the Allman Brothers recorded in Macon. And I knew that James Brown
downstairs here.
Yeah, that's exactly where we are now. And I knew that James Brown was not from Macon, but he had something to do with Macon.
Yeah, and he recorded downstairs.
Right, and that's about I didn't know too much more than that. And I'd heard of Capricorn Records, but I certainly didn't know anything about the pre-Little Richard era.
Yeah.
Going back in the 19th century. So that was all stuff
Yeah.
I'd done.
And most people, I mean, Little Richard was basically, in some ways, the start of
the genesis.
of popular music here in Macon. And all right, so what surprised you about Macon?
It surprised me that there was so much to uncover. Let's say pre-Little Richard and then even post-Little Richard. I mean, there was the Allman Brothers. There's nothing in that book that's new about the Allman Brothers. It's been written, people that know more about the Allman Brothers than me have written much better accounts of the Allman Brothers.
Yeah.
Because this book is about Macon. It's not really about them per se. But even just the Capricorn, the number of people that recorded here. And
we were just talking about Martin Mull recording here.
Yeah, the massive influence on the music that came out of Capricorn, and which a lot of people don't. If you're not from Georgia, a lot of people don't really know that story. I mean, they like the Allman Brothers and they like Marshall Tucker, but they don't know where it came from. They don't know the nuts and bolts of where it came from. So on that end of it, the more recent stuff from the 70s and 80s, I mean, just the massive amount of people that were down here and what was put out down here. But then also, the Otis Redding part of the story is massive, and his influence is massive. And the number of, and again, people have researched Otis Redding in greater detail than I have. But I mean, I found a clip of that ran somewhere. It was George Harrison of the Beatles talking about having an Otis Redding autographed album in his collection.
Oh, really?
I found little things like that. And then Little Richard's life story is intriguing because it's Little Richard. And then another thing I was surprised about that, it didn't just begin with Little Richard. If you go back, to the founding of the town, there was music, there were things going on. There was a female blues singer in the 20s named Lucille Hageman, who was from here.
Sure, yeah.
And she had a brief but solid run during the 1920s. There was the female group there on the cover, the Pickens sisters, who sang on NBC and CBS radio during the 30s and 40s. And
were they supposed to be like the Andrews sisters or something?
Yeah, when the Andrews sisters hit, suddenly they were looking for sister acts, and the Pickens sisters. And Jane Pickens, which is, I believe she's the one in the middle. The others eventually quit show business, but she carried on and had her own radio show for a little while in the 1950s. And there's actually a theater in Rhode Island that's, of all places, that's named after her. She married a very wealthy guy, and they lived in Rhode Island. And there's a Jane Pickens Theater up there that I would guarantee you most of the people that go there don't know it has a connection to Macon, Georgia. But there's a million stories, and they all are great, and they're all a little surprised,
Yeah. So you're a fan of making music now?
Yeah, Macon. Well, I was a fan of making music before. I just didn't know all of the details as well as I know them a little bit better now, anyway.
Well, and this studio, Capricorn,
in particular,
was supposed to be Otis's studio,
right?
And it was originally called Red Wall Studio, but unfortunately Otis didn't live, but Phil and Alan Walden carried it on, and
that dual, the two crew, the Waldens, the involvement with Otis Redding. I mean, that's one big story, and then you've got the Capricorn story, which is a second big story. All of that happened within a 20-year, 30-year period.
It is amazing. And then Phil did Capricorn 2.0 in the 90s, and it's an amazing story. Well, Ben, I want to thank you for joining me, and thanks.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for coming to the comp lunch today.
I appreciate it.
And he's working on another book right now, and we'll talk about that, but we'll have you back. And
great.
Because I'm really interested in that book.
But thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben. All right.
Fantastic.